Welcome back to Highway Through Health. We're not a crisis line, we're not a therapy show, and we're not licensed healthcare providers. What we are is a place where lived experience is taken seriously because too many people have discovered the more clearly they speak, the worse they're treated. We share personal experience not to give medical advice, but so that when people encounter the kinds of situations we discuss, they're ready to recognize patterns and respond effectively. This show is about language, power, and what happens when systems stop listening and start translating people into problems. If you've ever felt misheard, mislabeled, Dana, how are you?
Hey, hon, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself? Good to
I'm
hear.
doing good. Good.
Awesome.
Got a lot of I definitely am going to miss Steven being on late night. He's been a very important part of my life. I would not have survived even my first NDE and certainly the seizures that I went
Yeah.
through, and then everything subsequently, if it hadn't been for him and if it hadn't been for Conan. The seizures in particular, I one that I know I had died from, and I felt it in my head. Um, and there was something, I don't know if he had said something the night before on his show or if it was just something I remembered, but what got me out of it was thumping on the floor because I thought Steven told me go like this and remember what rhythm is, remember what music is. And by thumping on the floor like that, it brought me back into my body. And
Wow.
yeah, uh, so I never forgotten that. I mean, these guys meant so much, still mean so much to me, always have, that I had two cats that were named Conan and Steven.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah. So I'm glad he's going to go on and work with his son, who was named after his brother, who had perished in the plane crash with his dad.
Awesome.
And they're going to work on a Lord of the Rings movie, so I know that's going to be fantastic. Obviously, I'm a
Yep.
huge Lord of the Rings fan, so I know that
Uh,
I'm going to enjoy that even extra. So yeah,
wow. Yeah,
yeah,
sometimes those little social things, when you're going through all that intensity, what do you grab onto to hang on to the other side, right? And maybe that kind of gets into our topic today, because I was going through some things. My knuckles on my feet, there's no pads on my foot anymore on my right foot, so I'm starting to walk on my knuckles just in between skin, and it kind of hurts. And you
yes,
think of all the stuff we go through, And, you know, some of the outcomes, especially you start getting into organ failure, what happens then? A lot of us go from kidney disease. Kidney disease for me would be intravenous prednisone, which would pretty much finish off my eyesight, plus put on about 150 pounds of water weight before maybe that'll stop it, maybe it won't. And when you don't want to go through that, you already make up your mind, you know, no, I'm DNRing it, and my kidneys go, I'm going with them. And I don't know that people really get when you're talking about losing that fear of death. I mean, it had to happen to me when I look back on everything right before that first immersive event. That really, I mean, I had been everywhere, Mayo Clinic, all treatments had failed. You know, I'm swelling up like a balloon. My connective tissue is dissolving really fast. My eyes are going like crazy. I could barely walk. I had to push myself hard to walk, and I'm walking, you know,
Yeah.
it's extremely difficult, that kind of stuff. And then you're just ambivalent, right, about the outcome. Um, and that fear does go away. But that fear did have to go away down to that level, that deep, it doesn't exist anymore level to really open the door to those powerful spiritual experiences. And I was thinking back, as I was contemplating my foot and all this other stuff that you and I, and countless other people too, have gone through. We're not like playing victim here or anything. There's a lot of people in
Right.
a lot worse shape than us. But you know, you look back at was listening to a story about Pliny the Younger and how he used to murder Christians who wouldn't repent. And you know, in the Roman Empire is kind of like our empire today. You know, you have to worship the emperor, you got to pay homage to the gods, you have to do certain things to prove that that's where your prime loyalty was. It couldn't be to God. And so in those environments, how did they tell? It's coercion, right?
Yes.
And the story that I was listening to, he had all these people go saying things like, "Yeah, I was 20 years ago, but I quit doing it," and other people who were just coming up with all these reasons why they don't do that anymore. They did it one time, they were fooled, they were this, they were that, and he was, you
Mhm.
know, sorting out
Right.
people who could be asked to perform a ritual in front of them, you know, to prove that your loyalty to Rome, and you can walk out the door. But if you wouldn't do that, you're going to die. And that, you know, I really started realizing, where did the messaging in the church get goofed up? It's there because the only people that are really practicing it are the people that are saying no, and they'll walk into that and say, you know, I'm not budging. This is what
Right.
I do. This is why I do it. You articulate why you do it, and if it's offensive to somebody, sorry. It's just
Yeah.
you can't help it, right? And it is really a deep, deep level of fear rejection. I'm not sure, without really walking a chronic illness path, people get an idea of what that feels like. What about you? I mean, your
Yeah,
seizure was
definitely.
intense, right? And you're laying on the floor,
Yes.
literally in between life and death, and you get this
Yes.
rhythm thing going, and boom, 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 and then you start pulling, and you're getting it, you're going back in. It's like, here I go, get
Yeah.
up and fight another day, because you know you can go back the other way too, and that's not as scary or as ambivalent as going back in and doing this all over again, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You know, I had been through the death experience so many times and in a variety of ways. So it was not scary to me. And I mean, in addition to that, I'd been somebody who had attempted to unalive myself from having a life that was so difficult and painful. And then even to have walked through that, then to walk to the other side so that when things and events, I guess you could say, were transpiring in many ways to end me. It was like here I was fighting for my life because I wanted to tell somebody how much they mean to me, and I was finding meaning and I was finding purpose. So it was sort of like seeing
Mhm.
things flipped on their head a bit. You know, and the seizures, it was so bad that and I had prior had gone through having something not dissimilar, not quite that bad, but where it had affected my speech to where I had stuttered. for quite some time. And that was in the course of thinking I was going to lose my old house and thinking that I was going to be homeless and feeling like I didn't have anywhere to turn and not knowing what I was going to do next. And that was quite bad. And that was in the end of 02 and into the beginning of 03. Prior to the near-death experience I'd had in 03. And we're actually almost at the sort of the anniversary of that, which is weird that a lot of things come up at the same time.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, I know life is cyclical. I know that we plan all this prior to each incarnation because each of the events that we face, it is then, because Earth is a free will planet, it's in how we choose to meet these challenges. It's in how we choose to deal with and rise above the events, no matter what those of us around us might be doing or saying. How are we then loyal to our own conscience, to God, to a greater sense of purpose, to a greater sense of morality and consciousness that's unshakable? How are we then loyal to that? How are we then able to rise and raise our vibration to that level that Jesus had been the example of forgiveness, of love, of light? How then are we each, that's what they mean by ascension. Like, how are you raising your vibration with each challenge that you can meet? How are you allowing it to change you for the better? How are you allowing that so that you're a good example for those around you? And I know in those seizures, I mean, I ended up with like foreign accent syndrome. I ended up with everything that you could imagine. And these folks were taking advantage of that by mischaracterizing me, deliberately mislabeling me, tossing me into the hospital where I didn't need to be so they could steal my documents and steal my credit card and my wallet and do all these other things. I knew that there were certain things that were off at that time, and some just funny business going on with certain things with that particular group of people. It's a phony charity. I didn't realize they were a multi-state fraud, identity theft, fraud, and trafficking ring. But I was able to continue to go through that because there I was live tweeting with The Simpsons and live tweeting with Conan and live tweeting with, Stephen and The Late Show. And so in that way, I was like more focused. And certainly, like I'd mentioned, Lodge 49. I mean, that was just such a huge show for me and a very wonderful one, deeply philosophical. I spoke regularly over Twitter to the creator of the show, who's also an author. His name is Jim Gavin. And when I had mentioned the seizures, he said, my dad had seizures. So it was like I was able to keep pulling myself like step by step just by having these like different connections. So it really wasn't that determination. Right. And knowing that I was connecting through art and connecting through humor and music and things that really mattered to me, that were giving me that vibration of not thinking about things in a way that was negative, but thinking about things in a way that was positive. And that was keeping me going through, just really quite unimaginable horror that then got worse and worse. And I feel like, my life had been constructed that, because had I known at the time the depths of hell I was in, I don't know how I would have quite survived that, but getting it piece by piece, by having everything kind of meet in the middle so that I was being given the information back to myself that they tried to steal from me with the deliberately misused hypnosis. And the fact that I can even talk about that and the fact that that is what they're doing, that these folks have sunk to that depth, that is part of my mission. That is part of my healing. The fact that I did, get a miracle healing. And to your point too, I know what it is to be in that kind of pain, to have that bone on bone thing or bone on solid floor. It hurts like hell. It hurts like a pain that nothing else that I could actually put into words. But when you are in that kind of pain, you don't care what's on the other side. You almost it's almost very freeing in a way that I
Yeah.
would, struggle to adequately describe, but it's very freeing because you realize, oh, this is a hell, and
Hmm.
whatever is coming next, I'm okay with that because God in his infinite wisdom and mercy isn't going to force me to have this physical pain anymore. And in that first near death
Right.
experience
Right.
I had popping out through the top of my head when I was in such constant agonizing, literally crippling, just extraordinary physical pain all the time, to be free of that. I still had, awareness. I'll put it that way. I didn't have my body anymore, but I had awareness and it was so pleasant. It was so
Yeah.
pleasant. So being slammed back into my body and then noticing how heavy and wet it is in addition to the pain was something, you don't notice that your body is that until, and what it
Right.
was a meat suit until you had that contrast and something to compare it to. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that that can be very freeing. And as we talk about the Romans as well, I mean, they were the ones who crucified Jesus. These folks had
Hmm.
very much, they want you to worship money, and that's why Jesus had even said,
Yep.
render under Caesar the things that are Caesar's, render under God the things that are God's.
Absolutely.
And it's because they wanted you to worship money, and we have now within what we see in modern times, they want you to worship money. They want you to worship the shallow, the crass, the materialistic, the amoral, this win at any cost. Win what? I mean, it's just really ridiculous. They think that they want you to admire these like multi-billionaires with like 50 mansions and 20 yachts. No, why? That's
No.
stupid.
No.
I'm sorry. I don't see the point in that. And nobody else does either, but they are so busy filling that empty hole inside, that black hole inside of themselves, where their soul should be, where that center should be, and they're trying to fill it with more and more and more conspicuous consumption,
Oh
money
yeah.
worship, phony status worship, and now all this transhumanism, thinking they can bypass the spiritual. Well, you can't, and they're finding
No.
that out. They're finding that
Yep.
out.
Yeah, no, I look at that whole billionaire thing as just the
Yeah.
output of a sick society. Most of that should never happen. Most of the people that are doing that never really, sorry to say it, but you haven't earned it. I mean, never mind. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now because I think we're on a hot topic as it is. And but you're right, you do. And for me, stepping across the veil when all that stuff was taken off of me, then suddenly I'm like, uh-oh, this is way more real than anything that I was ever taught. And I knew nobody knew this, in that kind of context. And sure enough, getting out of that, that's when all the trouble started for me with the medical industry because it was like I knew what happened. I knew I was going to have to stand up for what happened, come no matter what, because you learn about all that. That martyrdom thing is not a fake thing. You realize that no,
Right.
this is you go, you make a stand, and you stand until you'll die on it, and if necessary. So that's what you do. But doing that really does bring those emotions on that come along after you get past that fear of death, because once that happens, you're not compromising anymore. And you know
Yeah.
that there's kind of a sense of urgency about what we're doing here. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily a hobby. This isn't fun. You know, there are souls are on the line, and so
Yeah.
it's really the to me at that point it was okay, do it all over again, just change the context and wait for the breakthrough. So that's what I've been doing pretty much since the day it happened. And
Yeah.
what is that? Well, I was I just practiced what I was doing naturally to offset the effects of serious affliction. Now I put it in a biblical context that does the same thing. It's the exact same thing, only now I try to marry those words up that say it's a little bit more real than most people allow themselves to believe. But once you really do and start practicing it and putting that stuff in motion, which is what we've been talking about, I think, and
Yeah.
mostly on this series, is it really does start making a difference in your life. It makes a difference in your mental health. There's a lot of stuff you're not going to be worried about. And it doesn't mean you're being dumb. It doesn't mean you're
Right.
not planning. I have a savings account, I'm I'm on a fixed income like
Right.
most other people around here. So in this disability condition especially. So I've got all that to deal with too. But it's not anxiety producing, is it? Because we know that at some point there's going to be a breakthrough one way or the other, and all this pain's going to go away. And until then, what we do is just use it to fuel the practice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it keeps me focused on it. So
Yeah. I mean, I use somatic.
it's like we got on the ride and it's impossible. We're on the ride and it's impossible to get off now. We can't get off the ride.
That's it. And for me, it's like, every day I sit and I take notes, because every day I allow myself to feel the relief of finally being away from what I consider, from what was a nightmare in hell. It was a torture and trafficking situation. They were purposely abusing me past the point of death and not giving me any place to go, and they thought it was fun. I didn't think it was fun. They thought it was fun. I
Yep.
wasn't amused. And I'm very, like I say, I'm furious about what happened. But having said that, I'm putting that in a way that the situation changes. I'm very grateful to God every single day that I got out. I'm in a beautiful place. I absolutely love it here. The people I live with are wonderful. My landlord is just absolutely wonderful, man.
That's
And he
awesome.
goes as a roommate. I wouldn't ever rent again from anybody corporate. And like I had said to somebody recently, I even if, via the quitam or something, if I ended up with a pot full of money, I'm still not going to move out of here. I would probably give Greg the money to buy the house, but I'd still rent the room here. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
very, very satisfied. I want to use the money to build Native American restaurants and food trucks. I want to be able to use the money to just not have to worry about living, but to also do things in the community to build this business of holistics and homeopathy and be able to
Mm.
promote that and have that make a difference and really see that start to get off the ground and be able to promote it, not just within the United States, but I would love to go visit my friend John in Scotland. That would mean a lot to me. But also to have that be sort of a busman's holiday that I can promote
Right.
that overseas, that I may be able to visit my friends down in Australia, and the same thing applies. So to me, this and definitely go to Canada. There's a lot of stuff I want to see in Canada, including Phil Hartman's star on the Walk of Fame up there. So it's like a number of things. I know this is applicable, so I wouldn't,
Mhm.
to me, it's not about, well, I want to buy this or that fancy. I don't even want a vehicle. No, the hell with that. I'll just keep taking lifts and making sure I tip the drivers well, because I don't want to have
Right.
to worry about a vehicle. I don't feel like it anymore. I just don't. I was never crazy about it. It's a lot for somebody autistic to drive because you already have sensory overwhelm, and now add to that people doing the beepity boop as they're driving. I don't have time. I just
Right.
don't want it. you know. So to me, it's like, well, I would know how to be a good steward of money, and there just seems to be a lot. There are just too many people who are very selfish, have vacuous interests, and really are not at all moral or centered in what it is they want to do, or what it just doesn't. I don't know.
Mm.
But I do know that, when you look at, and we had talked before about how the apostles were persecuted for being able to do the things that Jesus did and for being able to be the
Yep.
examples. And we've definitely seen that with this coercive abuse and the medical industry. They're predatory. They are just profiteers who are sucking the life out of people for profit. It's not ever
Mhm.
been under Rockefeller's whole thing. It's not ever been about making people well. It's about making them into revenue streams. And you see
Mhm.
when they're giving people what they know to cause cancer. And like I said, I'd seen on my phone, not only were they trying to fraudulently force me to take these known carcinogens, they were low key sending all my information to a place that studies how cancer tumors form. So that right there, I mean, like I say, I have the evidence, and they know I do. They know that I know. And they know that I'm not going to shut up about it. I'm horrified. I'm horrified not just that it happened to me, but that it's happening everywhere, that this is something that has become so pervasive that they don't even bother trying to hide it. But maybe that's the good part, because now it's all coming to the surface. Now we see the investigations happening at a federal level. Well, that needed to be done a long time ago, but thank God it's happening now, because there's no time like now to make sure that it stops. And I want to be one of the people that's right there with the ideas of how to do it better, how to have it be cost effective, how to be able to take that money and actually put it to good use so that we can do it ourselves, and to have that framework there for us to be able to do it ourselves, because that makes a lot more sense to have a homeopathic and holistic route. It's just like a lot of people who want to not be addicted, but aren't wanting these neurotoxic poisons pumped into them either. I've seen the cycle happen. When it depletes your dopamine, it forces people to go right back to that drug of choice because they don't feel pleasure anymore. And guess what happens? ODs and more addiction, and the cycle continues. And they need to admit this is part of what the failure is. This whole medical model of everything and the poisons, all the big pharma nonsense, they need to admit it's a joke. It's harming more people than it's doing good. And the iatrogenic harm is bringing them back, and then more money is being spent, and it's a never-ending cycle of blood money going into the pockets of the insurance companies and big pharma. That's why all the money keeps going up and the outcomes are going down. That's exactly why. And I'm glad that it's starting to be seen on a national level. Thank God. Thank God.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I'm, as a chronic pain person, I'm doing okay with what I have now, what I've been taking for the past 10 years. But, I'm seeing some of these other people running into issues with the medical industry. When they can control your pain, they can control you. But just like when they can control your fear, they can control you. And when those things for us, it's just to the point of, all right, well, maybe it's time we just legalize poppies again and let the artisan market take over. Because it seems like the AMA, APA, all these people are sticking their fingers in the pain management market as well. Say what you want, but opioids work, and I would rather have that or a derivative of it. I take Tylenols with codeine now, about 4 hours a day. But
I was lucky that that the medical marijuana, and again, in conjunction with me doing the keto diet, me doing meditation, me doing a number of other health things, but the medical marijuana is a big part and parcel of what helped me. And I knew they were getting mad because I was getting better, and they didn't want me to get better. They didn't want to admit they were wrong, but that's just too damn bad. And and at present, just simply because of the way the laws are here, they would, I would have to go to a doctor. And I thought, okay, I'm not doing that right now because I'm not in the kind of pain I was in. But I'm not going to do any other drugs other than have marijuana maybe once in a while. But right now, because I'm trying to prove what I need to prove for addictions medicine and everything else, and that it's not addictive, it's not an issue, I have 2 years clean time, or I will have 2 years clean time in June. But I'm not ever having alcohol again. I don't want any other drugs or anything else. I would never put another pill in my mouth. It's just not going to happen. So, yeah, I'm glad to see that they're reclassifying the marijuana. I'm glad to see that there is going to be reclassification for psychedelics. Again, I think we have to go to people who have had the experiences, the different shamans, different indigenous folks. That's who that needs to be in the hands of. We need to hand the power back to the people. And back to the folks who have been marginalized and punished for actually doing things outside the Rockefeller profiteering medical model for long time.
This presumption of being correct has gone on too far, and it's caused way too much damage. And I really, I'm seeing people now in the psych industry getting on and talking about how psychedelics are going to be a game changer for the psych industry, right? Well, wait a minute. You are the people who've spent the past 70 years demonizing these things, and you guys are the ones who have been pushing all these garbage theories down everyone's throat. You guys are the ones, and now a game changer. It's like, wait, you got a
Yeah.
rotten system that doesn't work. You're not willing to fix it. And this is the 20-year leap, right? Now they're finding the next thing they want to leap onto. So you get all these people that have questionable morals because what the hell were you doing for the past 20 years not fixing the stuff that you know is wrong within your own industry? Now you're going to hop over here and pretend to be an expert all over again. And most of it, I think, just gets down to patenting, the
Yeah.
drugs. They want to be
Yeah.
able to patent it, do that fear thing. You got to be afraid. Got to be afraid. I don't think
Right.
they should, you know. Anyway, that's
Yeah.
a whole topic that just kind of. I'm getting to the point of saying the best thing we can do is just throw psych out of the medical industry. You can
Oh yeah.
go be a professional, one thing or another thing, but
Yeah.
get out of medicine. If you can get
Yeah.
enough people, if you can get results that enough people talk about, they want to come see you, more power to you. But I think this mandatory public funding of these people has gone on way too long, way too
Oh
far, and
yes.
it's brought us nothing but misery. And you know, and even to the point where you and I can sit and talk about these topics that we're having, but can you imagine trying to have this kind of a serious conversation with a psych practitioner who's already gonna call you delusional, or you're gonna call you all kinds of names? This is a something that we've made up to appease, to go out. It's like there's no way. There's absolutely no way what we're talking about is made up. When you go through one of those experiences, you're
They know
not
it
the same
too.
person.
They know it
And
too. And I think there's more than a few. And I think it was in possibly within the Roseanne experiment. It was one of these experiments somewhere along the way. Uh, that it only really takes one person to stand up and say something's wrong, and then other people feel comfortable in saying, I didn't feel good about it either. And that's really the point where we're at. So I think there's going to be an awful lot of folks who have genuinely felt bad or didn't know how to, or if it was okay to speak up about, I didn't think these things were working either. And I think we're going to see a lot of that happen. And that's to the benefit, but uh, there are a lot of people who were egregiously and grievously harmed by these drugs, by these lies. And they
yeah,
are lies. I mean, they're lies. Uh, and
and
I think there are some people who feel genuinely bad that they played into that. And I'll be honest with you. I think there's been some people working behind the scenes, probably even people that were directly involved in my case who were very uncomfortable with things that they've seen, things that maybe they had suspected, but then had found been proven true about the harms that were going on.
mhm.
So I think there's been a lot of people who have wanted to speak up and out. And we do have a situation. Definitely, there's been big harm of people who, much like if you've ever seen the movie The Insider with Russell Crowe, about the tobacco industry and how he was threatened and his family was threatened for wanting to tell the
Mhm.
truth. And a lot of these same folks then went on to work in food and went on to work in big pharma. The same type of thing, and finding the same mafia type lawyers to do the same mafia type things. So I do feel like there's, because they knew with Vioxx that people were being threatened. Doctors were actually being threatened about, you better not tell the truth. So I can only imagine just how much worse that had gotten with these psych drugs, because it's a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. But we're seeing it
Oh yeah.
anyway. People aren't able to deny their consciences forever. And seeing the harm and the death and just the absolute devastation of life that these things cause, that these lies cause, uh, I'm certain has, made a big difference to some people that they, you know,
Uh, I watched a snippet of Roger McFillin grilling a doctor on X the other day. I think it was yesterday. And he could not get this guy to face reality no matter what he did. This guy was just defending everything. Oh no, we got to have these antidepressants. I think the topic was antidepressants in particular.
Yeah.
And of course, that what you and I experience are massively poo-pooed by that. We these experiences really kind of get totally in the way of that whole model of telling someone there's perpetually broken, you got a brain problem going on, or you don't have enough chemicals floating around in there to really help you out and be happy. When we talked about the whole purpose thing, there's
Yeah.
way more to everything once you learn what this whole thing is really all about. Then the game gets a lot easier to play, even though you're playing it with these kinds of things going on.
Right.
It's
Right.
you allow yourself at that point to reach in and find those emotions that overcome that. Then you set that stuff in motion. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And it works. What can I say? Sorry if people get offended by that, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And it's
It is.
incredibly beneficial, but you can't. The psych industry fights spiritual models. They don't want spiritual models, especially any kind of a model that says spirituality has a link to reality. That just can't be done because why? It's the empire mindset, isn't it? You have to
Yes.
worship the empire first, everything else
Yeah.
after. And if there's something out there called universal truth, that is a massive threat to the empire, the bureaucracy, the nonsense, and everything else that goes along with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I understand why a lot of things got classified to keep this kind of a system together that does really focus on control through coercion, intimidation, threats, and kind of
Yeah.
sadistically, just poking a completely fraudulent version of Christianity in everybody's face constantly and saying this is the only version that works.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying by that is when we talk about what we've talked about, those events, those past cross to the other side events that happen before your body dies, that's relegated to crazyville. So I'm it's really kind of interesting. It's been a very interesting position to be in because after I had that experience, I thought, wow, everybody's going to want to hear about this one, this is going to be really neat. And then, wow, did I find out it was completely the opposite. No, no, not only did nobody want to hear about it, it was too shocking, I think, in some cases, and some for people to even believe. There's so much inertia against being able to express that kind of a experience in rational terms. You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And I think it does get down to this truth
Yeah.
busting thing.
Yeah, for me it was they were researching and deliberately misusing a known healing modality with the quantum, healing technique, hypnosis healing
Hmm.
technique. They were deliberately misusing it and sadistically researching it. And I didn't appreciate that. I don't like being played with like a toy. Hopkins has been popped for misusing consciousness research before. Like I said, this is a multi state identity theft, torture, and trafficking ring
Hmm.
and research ring. So
All
that
it takes is
particular
a little
butcher,
label,
yeah,
right?
huh?
Hang a little label on you, and that's really all it
Oh,
takes.
yes,
For a
yes,
person, especially a disabled person, or if a person has, I've it really scares me what's going on with the special needs people because those are the
oh,
most
yeah,
vulnerable people out there. And we've seen how people behave towards people that know how to fight back. And I can
yes,
imagine, maybe in some ways I do want to know, but I don't want to know, how far this rabbit hole goes. And it does need to be investigated.
yeah,
It's too easy to abuse. The labels mean nothing. They're
that's
hostile to
it.
spiritual experiences. They're hostile to
Yeah,
informed consent. There's as hostile to civil rights.
yeah,
And where do these people come from? You can't wrap that up in a medical garb
right.
and perpetuity. At some point the game plays out, and I think the game's been played out for a long time. And this latest great leap towards psychedelics that they're trying to do and try to bring their credibility with them. Really, this is the credibility destroying moment that we've got to say, what are you bringing? What of this garbage are you trying to bring forward into something else that might actually have value and screw it up like you've been screwing it up
Mhm.
since, since the 117 years you've been trying to reinforce the eugenic slur as something
Right.
that means something.
Yeah, I really do feel like in many ways this is why I had the experiences that I did, why I have been able to use sort of like my ability to stand up for my rights because I wasn't ever scared about that. I mean, my father taught me that.
Mm,
So I was never afraid of that. Um, and I know one of the things that I kept hearing in the back of my head was you are as free as the land you stand on. And I think that has to do with my own Native American heritage and just
mhm,
that I at a point was just pissed off from being separated from it. I was pissed off that how people were doing real estate fraud and the land isn't theirs to begin with. Nobody owns land. What a stupid thing to think. You rent the right to live on it, but nobody owns it. You don't go out back and tell, hey, grass, stop growing. I own you. It doesn't work that way. It's just ridiculous. It's just a very stupid concept to begin with, and it's never made sense to me.
the
Um,
reward from the empire, right? You get to
yeah,
think you're special. It's another way of
yeah. Stuff
could be a
just so stupid. And really to think that somebody was going to have any kind of say over what I put into my own body. Oh no, I ain't playing that action, Jackson. That's not happening. It really just was just too much. I said, look, I've done
mm,
told y'all already. This stuff does nothing for me. I don't want to take it. Stop it. Just stop it. And
right.
and the more I kept standing up for myself, the more they were kept trying to be insistent. And I said, well, who the fuck do you think you are when you're at home? You ain't doing this to me. I don't want this crap. Stop it. And
Mm,
then I was just uncovering more and more fraud and more evidence of fraud. And I mean, they should have stopped. They should have known better, all of them. But they didn't. And forcing me
right.
to live with a domestic abuser so they could study it and I have to think now there probably were cameras all within that apartment. And maybe that was the case all
Mm,
along. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but just knowing how far they went, uh, something ain't right. And it was very, 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 very wrong. And knowing that there was some big money invested in that. With Hopkins and with McGill and with others. I know what I know now. I can't unknow it. And that's okay because
yeah.
me being able to stand up for it, like I said, I know when the FBI isn't even wanting to take my calls, they know that I'm telling the truth. And somebody is already very well aware of my whole case and what happened to me. And I
Mm,
didn't make any, bones about it when I wrote to Social Security. It's a 10-page letter. I named names. I said exactly what I was going through. Same thing with Maryland State Attorney General's office. I laid it all out there. And I've always made it known exactly where I can be found. I called investigative reporters. I'm not shy about any of this, but looking at
right.
my ID, that proves to me the state of Maryland is culpable because somebody at some level knew what was going on with this identity theft and fraud. And now I know it's tied in with California. I know it's tied in with a lot of these other things through that big group. And they know they're on the hook for what they've done to a lot of people. It's not just me, it's a lot of people.
Yeah.
But if I can be the spokesperson, if I can be the one that, like I say, I have the spiritual perspective, I am wanting to do things differently. I do know what works. I know it's more cost effective. And that's far more important to me than, I don't want to seek revenge or anything. It's none of my business. I kiss that up to God. May people get the karma they deserve.
Mm,
I don't want anything to do with it because I'm not putting my energy towards that. I have too many positive things to do. I have spiritual things that I'm going to do. Jesus didn't seek revenge, and I don't either. I just have a life to get on with. I don't want to look at any of those folks ever again for any reason,
mm-mm.
in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So I just leave them to their destiny. I have other things to do, and I have things to look forward to now, and I didn't have that before, and that matters far more to me uh,
Right.
than anything else. you know, I have a lot of positives to build. I have a lot of new relationships that I'm grateful for. I have a lot of activism and things that I know are important that God has given me that
Mm.
strength. And I do have that peace beyond all understanding, like we both have now. And like I've, you know, like talking to so many other people that have had the experiences we've had, at least to some degree or another. And you can't buy that with money.
No,
That's
you
something
can't.
you honestly you have to experience it. So if it me being able to share all this and stand up for my rights and help other people do things and help there to be a better system out there and more options in place that are affordable, that work, that bring positive results, that matters to me. Then I'm actually living my purpose, and I'm
Right.
honoring the things that I saw done wrong from my adoptive mother to my dad on up through, you know, what I saw with my cousin slash birth mom.
Hmm.
I'm honoring everybody's memory. I'm honoring the things that were harsh for them to make it better for the next group of people. I'm honoring my godson's memory by doing something that brings
Right.
change, and that matters to me. I want his son to grow up in a better world that's more inclusive and isn't going to mischaracterize any of the trauma he's going to have from his dad not being here. I
Hmm.
want things different, and that matters to me. That's where I put my energy. That's where I put my fire. You know, I don't want to dwell on what happened, other than I want to make sure it changes.
Yeah, for me, it's really not about. Yeah, I agree because it is a revenge thing, but it is to destroy the system that produced the kind of garbage that happened to me. You know, no is no,
Right.
and that
Exactly.
was nothing but just a joke. And then it's systemic persecution, and then it's let's smear you to everybody. Then let's demonize you. You know, it's and really over something that's their problem. I mean,
Right.
it's their fear projection they're dumping on
Yes.
people who won't show fear reaction. We don't,
Yes.
as we tried to say in the
That's it.
beginning here, you're playing the wrong card. If you're
Yeah.
playing the fear shame card, you're playing the wrong one because it ain't going nowhere. And but that's a big part of the Roman coercion system, is it not? You will conform. Here's the label. You'll conform. Here's your repentance. And your
Yeah.
repentance just happens to be taking psych drugs until you say, "Oh yes, yes, Pliny, these drugs are great." Tell
Yeah.
tell Emperor Pfizer I'm a citizen in good standing again, and
Yeah.
but it's not going
Yeah.
to
That's
happen with
it.
us, right?
Yeah.
So we're saying no, 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 leave us alone, leave us alone. But then you find out they got all these crazy slurs, and they just keep whipping out something else, and none of this stuff has, there's no blood test, there's no proof of any of this. This is just a bunch of people who sit around and vote on behavior that they believe that they have some inherent right to judge better than someone else walking down the street. And that's in spite of the fact that the data consistently shows that they're not effective, certainly not anywhere near effective as the amount of money that they take from all of us every year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely fraud, and they know it. It's just arbitrary shit slinging. That's it. It's just
Hmm.
absolutely arbitrary garbage, and they know it. They know it.
To sell
That's
pills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all it is. When I look at how Johnson and Johnson knew that the baby powder was toxic and had asbestos as far back as the late 50s and early 60s. And instead of, pulling it off the market and reformulating or doing something, no, they found lawyers in order to keep it out there. That's sick, but that's the
Hmm.
same thing, the same logic, the same tactics, all the same stuff that they are applying to these neurotoxic poisons, and they know what they are. They're sold as torture chemicals in other countries, the same formulations. They just market them differently here. And that's why they had these laws made in order to force people to take it, to make
Hmm.
them look good, to keep the profits rolling in because they know it's poison. And they knew it from the start. And so they did with Zyprexa. I think that's Lilly with the Zyprexa. But
Hmm.
Janssen and Johnson are the ones with risperidone and Invega, the ones that there had been multiple lawsuits about that are still somehow on the market still. and they shouldn't be. They're known carcinogens. They were designed to be carcinogens. I'm glad Wisner Baum has they have a class action lawsuit right now against both Janssen and Lilly for risperidone, Invega, and Zyprexa. And I thought, okay, we'll see, the truth is coming out. So there's more and more cracks that have been appearing in this. So, where the momentum is on our favor. Let's put it that way. The momentum is there. God's going to make sure that all these false prophets are burnt to the ground and burnt to a crisp. And that's the point of history we're at. And we are at that transhumanism versus post-humanism, which is what those of us who have been through the death and near-death experiences, we're post-humanism because we are spiritual. We have risen above that. We have that perspective of the spiritual, and it is a truth. And it's a truth they cannot deny. They can't deny our truth. They have wanted to because, we got to keep the profits rolling in. And it's like you had said, they have been trying to use fear. We've had a very fear-based economy, a very fear-based system, and that is crumbling completely apart. And they know this. And you know what? I'm here for it. We know what we're talking about when we're going to see things that are actually based on truth. We're going to see actual people stepping up to the plate to be able to help one another instead of all this fraudulence and force and just this disgusting behavior.
You can tell, I think, generally by talking to someone who really has had one of these death experiences. Rebirthing experiences would probably be a better way to describe it.
Yes, I would agree.
Because there's just so many darn similarities. And then when you start realizing, it's a pathway, and whoa, wait a minute, we can learn how to exploit these pathways and bring everybody more peace and more happiness and more, contentness naturally without having to have these crazy narratives. But the problem is it does get in the way of the empire. It absolutely will. You will be calling out, you will not tolerate deception. You won't tolerate it being pushed on you. You won't tolerate it anywhere. It's very intolerant of deception, massively. This is where we got into that whole thing about X5. It was so intolerant of deception, it can't coexist with deception. It's like matter and antimatter in some ways.
Yes.
And the deception side gets wiped out. So when you go into the eternal side, watch all those artifacts of deception that are floating around your consciousness tied into your DNA or however the heck they got there to form this receiver that you are. And you got to deal with all those emotions coming in. You find out, okay, this is how you deal with it. There's a real simple way of dealing with it. And it begins with honesty, radical, rock hard honesty that just never wavers, never budges. And the rest of it starts flowing, and you just build the rest of the framework around it, and it all becomes natural. So I think that's what we're trying to get out.
Yeah. And we see with the autistic, a lot of these autistic children, particularly the nonverbal autistics, but even I have had experiences with telepathy. So they're knowing that telepathy is real. So we're seeing a lot of kids now that these younger generation have a very different perspective on things. And when you see that with telepathy, which is obviously it's going to require I'm all for it. I was always somebody that never had a poker face, was just very, blunt and very honest about my reactions. I would try to be tactful depending on who it was or what it was. But I, was really genuinely not somebody who could, hide a reaction. And I think that's okay. So for me, that's not a problem. And I feel like as we're coming into that, and the more that we've, I know for me, it's about raising the frequency and vibration. So we're also seeing, of course, with Dr. Stephen Greer as somebody who's long studied that intercorrelation between interdimensionality and meditation and being able to look at things from a multiverse point of view, and the same thing with the UFOs and how interstellar travel and things of that nature and how that all interconnects. We're
Hmm.
definitely coming up. That's why the exposure is happening at the same time the disclosure is, because it's all interconnected. And it is the fall of the fraud. It is the end of the deception in a
Yeah.
multi-layered way across the board. And it's needed to happen. So that really is what was discussed in Revelations, as well as what was talked about with Dolores Cannon's work. And I think this is why we see Greg Braden's work, because he came out of geology, but he had also studied a lot with archaeology and some of these ancient civilizations that had fallen and where that
Hmm.
connection is. And we're just seeing
Yeah.
history repeat itself at this point. I saw a gentleman recently, I don't remember where I saw this, but was talking about how Revelations really deals with something that's internal. As opposed to an external, but it deals with the internal, and I thought that was an interesting interpretation of it, because
Hmm.
it really does come down to each of us as individuals being able to confront the confliction within ourselves and to get clear, and to have that, to have like the scales fall away and have
Right.
everything be very, very clear and forthright, and to be like Saint Stephen and not be afraid. And where it says he fell
Hmm.
asleep, it wasn't that he died. He was saying he forgave everyone and fell asleep. And I think
Yeah.
we're to take away from that it is just the same thing. I actually remembered saying in the midst of everything I was going through, and saying to Mr. X, death is a pinch in the heart. And that really is what it
Hmm.
is. It and the more you have people coming away from this fear base and not falling for that anymore, and not falling for the illusion, and not falling for all this materialist, uh, very amoral, materialistic, very greed based, cutthroat type of ideology anymore, the more we're going to see that crumble away.
Hmm.
And that's what they mean by, raising the vibration and raising the vibration of the planet to one of light and love. And that's exactly where we're at, because as more people are coming into this realization, more people are coming into actual values,
Right.
and realizing that we're all interconnected, and seeing how the fraud and deception and the abuse has just been so destructive and so devastating. And I think too the whole
It's
thing
so
with the
normalized.
artificial, yeah, the artificial intelligence is kind of bringing that into sharper focus as well. um, Nobody wants that,
Yeah.
and so again we're seeing that kind of bring things to a boiling point too. But that's okay. It's needed to
Hmm.
come to that. We were headed that way, and we're at the peak of that energy. We're flipping back over to where it's light as opposed to all that darkness, and we've needed that for a while.
Yeah. I mean, it does get back to what we learned through our rebirthing, I'll call it rebirthing experiences. The
Yes,
source of intelligence is far, far greater than anything you can crank out of an AI machine. And while linking computers and doing things like that can be helpful, it's actually completely unnecessary if we were to normalize around immersive spiritual experiences and people in those spiritual experiences, because you'll have far more computing power inside yourself than that machine ever will. So it's really kind of a joke that we're doing them. And because I've noticed, when I take AI to its limits, I play with it a lot, but it it has a hard time going along with what you and I talk about. You have to, what we talk about, spirituality is reality, getting it to make that jump and start lining up the language that goes along with it. It's constantly wanting to push back, push back, push back, and make it, get into that, well, a theoretical kind of a thing. It
right,
doesn't, it just won't go there. And and that's the way it's being programmed. That's the way it calculates reality. And the way it's calculating reality is that you don't have a thing called God-given rights when you really get down to the core of it. And if it can, pre-patent and pre-copyright, then what's the point in having authors? What's the point in having musicians? Because, you take a quantum computer, you can pretty much pre-patent every beat that's not been
Yeah.
already patented.
Yes.
And then guess what? Every musician along gets to pay royalties to the quantum computer that just patented it or copyrighted everything, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing goes with patents. You can just start have a patent machine, just start imagineering all kinds of stuff, patented here, patented here, patented there. And basically, small inventors would be tied up on patent infringement stuff for the rest of their lives. And it's easier for you to just pay a fee to the big machine that already thought of it because you're borrowing it from the machine. So this whole notion of origin of intelligence and where you're tithing your money to, how you're worshiping, all that should be front and center in the AI debate. Like I said, I use
Mhm.
it. It's got limitations. It's got some advantages. It's got definite limitations. But it's not a pot until we had that debate about civil rights, what intelligence is, where it comes from, things of that nature, how this is going to tie into patents, how it's going to tie into people's ability to make a living, how it's going to be able to, you know, what is this thing? What's the ultimate end game here, besides being a key cog in the surveillance state and the pre-patent state and the pre-copyright state? I'm not seeing it yet,
I
so I think
I
somebody's got some
think we're headed
explaining to
back to
do.
a barter. I think we're headed back to the barter economy. And again, I'm all for that. I feel like that is a much more sustainable, sensible, and practical way of doing things. I always have thought that because what we have right now is corrupt corporate oligarchy. This is not
Yeah,
capitalism. I've read Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, and I know this is not capitalism. Granted, it's been a few minutes, but I remember what I read. And
right.
it was really about being able to give back to your community, about paying people fairly so they're able to participate in the economy. It was about being able to fight the feudal system, which is what this corrupt corporate oligarchy has brought back into play.
Yep.
So I think we're going to go back into having a more barter based system, and I'm all for it. I think being able to even things out so that people are able to just directly help one another, realize our interconnectedness, realize our sovereignty, realize that we are souls having a temporary human experience. So for people to have that awareness
Hmm.
and be working off that and have an actual morality that celebrates the individual person and how we each contribute and are interconnected and are a piece and part of God, and to respect, protect, um, and be aware of that. That's where we're headed, and I'm all for it. I'm glad of it. I'm glad to see this false system of money is so
Mm.
arbitrary anyway. Who decided that gold is supposed to be a thing? Who the hell decided that? I prefer
Oh.
silver. I prefer
Mhm.
turquoise. You know what I'm saying? Again, we're looking at
Oh, I
just how
know.
arbitrary and ridiculous all this is. Quite frankly, you know.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
true.
There's lots of things that we can do, and I know that the rebirthing experiences are going to be when we can get those things back again, and we know that that's verifiable. You can go there, do it, experience it for yourself. You'll know
Yes.
exactly what we're talking about when that day comes. That is what really unleashes the emotions that are going to come through and blast all that, wealth
Yeah.
inequality, scarcity creation. What we really do is create scarcity with our models that we're using today, and we do that deliberately because
Yes.
in
Yes.
many respects, the empire needs people in scarcity if you want to keep them in line, because fear,
Right.
coercion, pain, suffering, all those are tools of the empire, and they're used to control people, right? Well, the kind of society we're talking about, after you have that immersive experience and you know what that's, you get exposure to and start to integrate emotions that you forgot even existed in the first place, then
Yeah.
that takes care of, there you go, problem solved. This was an experiment. I'm out of here. See you later,
Yeah.
not coming back. This was fun, but I'm not doing it again, kind of a
Yeah.
thing. So
I
yeah,
think
it
I think
changes
the
everything.
I think the ethical use of QHHT, past life regression hypnotherapy, QHHT is going to play a role in that too. Because people have been, you do end up having healings. You do help facilitate
Mm,
reconnecting God with the person and helping to facilitate those healings happening. And I really feel like bringing that knowledge to a greater amount of people, showing that it does work. We've had people working in that field for years, but of course, Big Pharma and all is going to make sure that they stay way in the
mm,
background so folks don't hear about this. But again, I think that's going to be coming to the forefront. And again, I'm here for it. I want to be able to provide a place for people to have a follow up with those spiritual experiences, how to put that into good practice
mm,
and to be part of a community that builds out like ripples on a pond, that we're able to help facilitate this and help it
right.
grow. And that's definitely where I'm at. Like I said, I'm all here for that. That's where I put a lot of my work into and what I try to build that framework
Yeah.
and really make sure that people hear about it. Yeah.
After my first experience and then the reaction that happened afterwards, I knew there was no more important thing in the world to do what I was doing. I was working on a couple business things I was doing, and I quit. I started doing exclusively plants, and started working on, okay, how do I translate the language, from what
Right.
happened,
Right.
when the suffering started, what goes away, how it sets you up for the whole thing, because that's really what it is. Once we can get people, it's the event is spectacular. It's beyond
Oh yeah.
spectacular. There's tons of people who've had it. So now what's that pathway, and what kind of, verbiage inversions are we dealing with that keep knocking people off that pathway? And it was that whole topic we started with, that got me thinking, maybe the price for some people is just too high. Maybe they don't realize, you know, what no actually means. Maybe they're afraid to go find out what that actually means. But we weren't. And
Right.
we found out that that's really the key to making the process work in your favor and to help you understand what's going on here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hopefully someday we can stop the stigma and get back to business, but I don't know. We'll find out. I know I'm doing my part. You're doing your part.
Yep.
I don't know what else we can
Momentum
do.
is in our favor, and I think this is we're certainly consistent because we're telling the truth, and I think the more people that
Mhm.
have awareness and are able to listen to our conversations and really realize that there are ways of building upon this, that and how to follow it up with a practical sense, and I think by putting it into practical terms and saying here's now here's how you can follow that up. And I think by just being out there and being the example and having the conversations, like I said, momentum is on our side.
Yeah,
So we just need to keep holding steady and doing what we're doing and being the example, because then people are going to come to us,
we'll
and
do it.
like us. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've hit our hour mark again already. Yeah, we have.
Wow. It goes
Another
quick,
great time
man.
talking with you, Dana. It does go fast, doesn't it?
Yeah, I
Thanks a
know.
lot. Well, maybe next week we'll get to speak with Gregorio. I'll try and talk with you before
So
then, and maybe we'll
yeah,
set up another
I hope
phone
so. I
call with
look
him.
forward to talking to
All right.
Craig. And I think workbooks are a great thing. I'm doing Rainn Wilson's Soul Boom also. So we're seeing a lot
Mhm.
of this with the spiritual from a number of different angles. So it's a really positive thing. I'm glad to be part of it.
In that Renewing Life program that I went to in Minneapolis, there was always uh, something to do for next week. There's something to think
Yep.
about in regards to other than your misery. So it was that's very important. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. Sounds great.
Yep.
All right then. So then we'll be talking again really, really soon. Thank you very much
Yep.
again for good talk.
Absolutely, hon. Always a pleasure. Look forward to it. God bless. Beautiful week, hon.
All right. See you later.
See you,
Bye
hon.
bye.
Bye.